Chimera, mother, and dragon anarchist, Amanda Rachwitz.
Okay, so first of all, show of hands, how many of you heard my talk last year at some point? Okay, a few of you. All right, so just for those of you who don't know who I am, on Facebook I go by the Dragon Anarchist, and that turned into an accidental branding thing that came from the fact that I'm a fantasy nerd and I love dragons. And I turned the whole dragon thing into a thing about human symbology, because I liked the version of dragons in fantasy that were idealized as these really intelligent beings that were very wise. And when I became passionate about how ideas can change the world, I decided that it was kind of a neat concept to use the idea of a dragon as the way that a human being can sort of become more wise and expand our power and influence in the world, and that's like developing the wings of the dragon. And the dragon is incredibly powerful. It has more presence, it can fly, it can expand its influence across the world, and if it's a good being, then that is a good thing. And since I'm passionate about good ideas and I want them to spread and I want us to be able to refine our ideas and put good ones out into the world, I decided that I would use my nerd love of dragons as a sort of symbology thing, and that's how I became the Dragon Anarchist. So that's who I am. In last year's talk, for those of you who don't know, I'm sort of spinning off of a little bit. Last year I talked about how ideas are the one thing that change the world because they are what human beings act on. Our beliefs and our ideas are what we live out, and so you have to change how people think in order to change the world. But what I talked about last year was how people who want to control others, people who want to rule the world and live as a parasite class leeching off of our productivity, use our ideas and our beliefs against us. And I talked about how they trick people into seeing their own violators of their free will as protectors. And today, what I'm going to talk about is how the state does that and why they do that, why they need to be able to manipulate our ideas and how they do that, and the manifestations of that. And a lot of the symptoms that people don't realize are symptoms of the fact that the state has completely manipulated and altered us as humans. The title of my talk is Humans versus Robots: What the State Stole and How We Get It Back. So what I'm going to talk about today is that the state has leached off of us a lot more than just our dollars, our productivity, and our life force. They've leached off of us our humanity, and they've attempted to actually rob us of the thing that makes us human, of our core. And I'm going to talk about how they do that, and then I'm going to point to some of the symptoms, because I think it's really important for us to be aware when we're looking at ourselves, our psychology, our emotions, our everyday lives. It's important for us to be aware how much of that isn't us or is a result of something that never should have had anything to do with who we are. So I'm going to show a slide here that just shows a few of the attributes of a robot. And I want all of you to note these points and think of them and sort of bookmark them in your brain, because I'm going to come back to it a little bit later in the talk, and I'm going to tie in some of the things that I'm saying with this. So when you think of a robot, you think of something that is 100% programmed and designed by human beings. It's programmed by external inputs and commands. It's only capable of whatever its human programmers design it to be capable of. And it requires constant external input or data or remote control of some kind to operate or function. It doesn't just come out into the world living and breathing all on its own. It's not something that is born. It's not naturally occurring. We make it, and it's completely controlled by us. We have to make it be, and it requires us for it to exist, for it to be able to do anything at all. It functions mechanically, and it lacks an awareness of itself. It does not have consciousness the way we do, an awareness of its own awareness, where it can study itself, why it does what it does, and can watch itself and be aware of why it's doing or what it's doing and why and all of that. It does not question and ponder freely the way that we do. A robot doesn't do that. And it doesn't explore or learn by any means that it wants. It doesn't do those things, which is what a child and any human being, any human's brain naturally does. It doesn't do any of those things. So it's very important that you sort of just simmer on that thought and bookmark it in your brain for a minute, because I'm going to come back to that and tie in a lot of the symptoms of what the state has done to us with this robot right here. How many of you here, by show of hands, are familiar with the work of John Taylor Gatto? Oh, awesome. Like several of you. Okay, so for those of you who don't know who he is, he wrote The Underground History of American Education. That was a huge wake-up call for me, because that illuminated the original purpose and intent of state compulsory schooling, especially as it came to be in America. And I'm going to quote him right here, and this is a very powerful quote I want you guys to think about just while I go through this. Children learn what they live. Put kids in a class and they will live out their lives in an invisible cage, isolated from their chance at community. Interrupt kids with bells and horns all the time, and they will learn that nothing is important or worth finishing. Ridicule them and they will retreat from human association. Shame them and they will find 100 ways to get even. So through state compulsory schooling, the state removes the young developing human from most of the natural world around them and basically teaches them to accept reality secondhand. And John Taylor Gatto was a school teacher for, I think, at least 30 years. And he was a school teacher in New York. He ended up winning, I think, Teacher of the Year awards more than one time, and he ended up resigning, and I believe he wrote to the New York Times why he was resigning and said, "I don't want to hurt kids anymore." He saw the system he was a part of, and he studied history, and he figured out that the intent of state schooling never had to do with educating children. The people who are part of that system believe that they are part of something good, but that was not the original design of it, and he saw that. And he wrote The Underground History of American Education. He also wrote Dumbing Us Down, which is a slimmer book. It's about this thick. The Underground History is a pretty big book, but it's absolutely worth the read. So if you can get your hands on it, I would highly recommend it. Why does the state need to do this? Why does the state need to spend 15,000 hours of a human being's life, sectioning them off from reality? Because human beings will not just easily submit to anything. The people who wanted to gain power over those who fled to this continent that were free, they understood that it would take gradual generational erosion at the human being. The people who fled to the North American continent, a lot of people don't realize that there were many, many decades and a few centuries even, that these human beings lived on the frontier anarchically. There was no government around. These were people homesteading, developing towns, and there's tons of evidence that a lot of these towns did not have anything like a government, no police, no anything, no law enforcement for many, many, many years. How many of you know who Laura Ingalls Wilder is? That Little House on the Prairie? Okay. Those novels, those autobiographical novels she wrote, which were a story form of her life, we're talking about her life on the frontier, and something someone pointed out to me was that conspicuously something is missing from all of her life, and that is government. The towns that she lived in, the homesteads, the people around her, there were no police. There was no such thing as driver's licenses and social security numbers. There was none of this stuff. That stuff didn't exist then, and it didn't occur to anyone that they needed it. So again, how do human beings who are free, who have no concept of anything other than freedom, give it up? The people who rule the world started speaking about, and they talked about, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds actually discussed this in the open, but most of us don't know it. You can go and look at history and find where they talked about this. But the people in power knew how crucial it was to get a hold of children. They knew this was going to be gradual. They couldn't come in, pitchforks, torches, take over a town, pillage. That's the old school way of controlling people, and it's way too risky, right? Because it's messy. I talked about this last year in my talk. If you want to control someone, you can do it directly, but you risk them defending themselves, right? A burglar is going to risk the fact that the person whose home he's invading is going to shoot him. People who want to rule others and still be able to leech off their productivity without producing any value for themselves need to know that they can get away with that, and they don't want to mess with violence. They need layers between them and the people that they are violating. So we're going to look at how the core personhood is developed, what it looks like, our core person, before we get into how the state removes that and some of the symptoms that we see today in modern society of that having been removed from people. So signs or symptoms, personhood basically comes from the development of the person, and that is acquired through direct experience of reality. That is when I go out into nature and I am experiencing it and I am taking in that information and I am studying it. That is when an artisan is working on whatever craft he or she has and experiencing the nuances of how to develop that craft. That is direct knowledge, that is firsthand experience. If you know how to make something, how to create something, and you have developed that skill, then nobody who says, well, I read online somewhere that that's the wrong way to do that, can take that from you if you have 20 freaking years of doing that thing and you know exactly how it's supposed to be done. Am I right? Yeah? Can I get an agreement on that? If you have direct experience of something over and over again, have you ever had somebody who has no experience, read online, that that's the wrong way to do it? Yes. Okay. That would be a symptom of a problem. The core is built through direct experiences in reality, investigation, discovery, contemplation, time alone with thoughts, time to study, figure out, conclude, self-teach based on direct experiences and conclusions that you're coming to yourself. The signs of that, and you will see that in a lot of anarchists here, is that that person can carry on rational discussion on a variety of topics. That person can explain the foundation for their reasoning, for their conclusions, and they rely on their own understanding and their own conscience because they developed it. They developed it through direct firsthand experience of reality. That person also, you will notice, desires freedom. You see that in entrepreneurs, you see that in the anarchists, you see that in people who are out developing themselves and they want any way they can to get around rules. They won't be subdued, and that's because they know they have something, they have direct personal experience of reality, they know how to go and get what they want out of life, and they're going to do it. I'm going to quote John Gatto again. Whatever an education is, it should make you a unique individual. It should furnish you with an original spirit with which to tackle the big challenges. It should allow you to find values which will be your roadmap through life. It should make you spiritually rich, a person who loves whatever you are doing, wherever you are, whomever you are with. It should teach you how to live and how to die. How does the state go about destroying a desire for direct firsthand experience? If we're out there in the world experiencing reality and we can think logically, we won't submit to being ruled, and that's a problem. So how does the state destroy our natural desire, our free will? How do they break it? Curiosity comes from the questioning mind. Our mind thinks in conscious questions all the time, naturally, subconsciously even. Our subconscious is a computer. Right now, my brain is determining a million things by looking at this room without me consciously having to think it. It's answering the question, what is that? It's a chair. It's answering the question, what are those? They're chandeliers. It's answering a million questions. Our brain is a computer processor. What the state has to do is kill the conscious questioner. If you want to kill curiosity, you kill the questioner. Kill the questioner, and you have left a passive absorber of entertainment who believes on a subconscious level that nothing is truly new or worth learning, interesting enough to seek out. You're left with someone who basically believes nothing's really worth discovering, nothing's very interesting. And you do that by killing curiosity. And how does one kill curiosity? How do you kill the questioning brain that we're born with that naturally would lead to a developed core and a developed human being who has a sense of self? You do it through the destruction of personhood, and how you do it is you train them. John Gatto actually mentioned an experience where he saw a young boy who had figured out that you could train fleas, and anyone who's had an experience with fleas know that those fuckers jump. And he figured out that if you put them in a jar with a lid on it, the fleas, after they wear themselves out trying to get out, will eventually completely quit jumping. You can train the fleas to stop trying to get free. And John Gatto talked about that moment because it was his moment that he realized as a school teacher he was the flea trainer. And he didn't want to be that anymore. How do you train the fleas? The core is destroyed by training someone to just memorize and repeat second-hand knowledge. That all knowledge just comes from external authorities and other humans. You don't get that yourself. And that's communicated indirectly. Just by putting a child in school and sectioning them off from everyday reality and their family and the rest of the economic world and nature around them, you communicate to them that that world isn't worth shit. You communicate to them that how I learn is by somebody telling me what reality is. I don't go do it. I learn it from an authority. Because that child has no sense of how to experience direct knowledge for themselves and develop truth and a sense of what they know about reality, and they're just being fed data, they parrot what they're being told, and they assume that how to know something is to parrot other people's opinions. Everything worth knowing is already known by somebody else. Some other authority has it all figured out, and that is repeatedly communicated through the schooling system. I have noted here this concept of chronological snobbery. Are any of you familiar with that term? Any of you know what that is? Cool, okay. That's a little bit of a new one. It was new for me. How many of you know who C.S. Lewis is? Okay, Chronicles of Narnia. He actually talked about chronological snobbery in his day. It's the notion that the time that you're alive, whatever human being you are and whatever time frame you're in, that's when all of the knowledge is absolutely the most accurate. It's the best. This time is the best time. Everything kind of old and ancient is just without worth. It's probably wrong. And there's actually no rational or logical reason to believe that. How many of us had to figure out by learning history that we were really fucking wrong about a lot of stuff? Any of us? Okay. I did a lot. And it was a huge awakening experience. Then you overwhelm and overstimulate them constantly with external inputs and data and entertainment. So instead of letting them have any opportunity to still their mind to intake what's going on in outward reality, they are constantly having stuff forced at their five senses, and their five senses are being overwhelmed by external stimuli from other humans, not from nature, not from the quietness and the stillness in the forest or in the beautiful Sonoran Desert or wherever it is in the tropics, wherever it is in nature, not from sitting with a family and listening to your family members converse about their skills, about their relationships, about their life. No, it's fed to you through screens, and it's fed to you through human beings who tell you that you're going to be tested on their version of reality. You need to swallow it, repeat it, memorize it, and you don't get to question it. Some of the signs of that missing person, and all of us talking to statists and family members who are not awake yet, understand what this is like, can't follow logic, can't explain or justify beliefs with reason. I didn't used to be able to do any of this. I had a huge blanket of fog over my brain. I didn't want to engage in anything like debates. I didn't want to engage in anything that had to do with what I believed because I had a vague emotional concept or feeling of why I thought something and no ability to back it up, and I didn't even know why. These people follow crowds without question. How many of you are familiar with studies where you can watch that a human being will see everyone else moving in a direction around them or standing up and they just follow? You guys familiar with those studies? Okay. This has been proven as a thing, and that's actually not normal. It's not normal when I'm sitting in, some room somewhere and I have my own agenda, my own things I'm doing. I have no reason to suddenly stand up. Everyone else around me stands up, and so I just assume I should stand up because everyone else is. The me now wouldn't just assume I have some reason to stand up. I'd probably look around and go, why the fuck is everybody standing up? I have no idea what's going on here. And I wouldn't just assume I was supposed to do anything. But how many people do you see go, oh, everybody's going that way, oh, okay. And they just walk off. People will walk right off a cliff now following someone else. These people want a leader. They want a master. They don't have a sense of self-direction because they don't know what reality is. They didn't go and figure it out for themselves. So they want someone to tell them what to do. And you will meet these people. How many of you have been able to figure out basic things on your own, but had a stranger walk up to you with the information they needed right in front of them, look you in the face and go, how do I find blah, blah, blah? And you go, the sign's right there. And they're like, oh, is that the elevator? Well, I don't know. Do you know any other doors that look like that? I'm pretty sure that that's the elevator, since elevators kind of look like no other door. It opens from the middle and has a button on the side. That's a great example of how people have lost their ability to trust their minds because they don't have any sense of direct experience or knowledge. So far, all of this makes sense to you guys, right? You're following? Okay. Now what I want to discuss are some of the unexpected symptoms of a missing person or lack of a developed core. Things that surprised me, that I started looking at and I started making the connections, and when I did, I got excited because if we can make people aware that these are symptoms of what the state has done to us, we can heal our friends and family and ourselves. And it's how I help to heal myself and bring back my autonomy and my intelligence and my ability to generate my own fulfillment and joy and entertainment, my ability to determine for myself what is true or not true. And if we know what these serious symptoms are, we can help each other out. So symptoms of a lacking core, underdeveloped personhood that are missed. How many of you are familiar with chronic anxiety? I'm not talking about the anxiety that is a natural biological response to an impending threat or danger. That is normal, and it should be momentary. But if you read about anxiety now in the world of psychiatry, there are psychiatrists and psychologists talking about the fact that people are suffering from a sense of anxiousness that they can't even find the cause of, and they don't know where it's coming from. It's following them every single day. And I started paying attention to friends and family that I knew that told me they suffered from that or described that, and I started looking at their lifestyle. I started looking at how they spoke, what their psychology was like, how they talked, what they thought, how confident they were, how they felt about the world, and I noticed some things that were creepy, and I figured out some connections. Some part of our subconscious starts to go off with alarm bells when it knows that we're not able to protect ourselves, teach ourselves, grow, learn, enough to become self-reliant and self-actualizing. And our conscious brain doesn't know that that's the problem. Someone suffering from a chronic anxiety who doesn't know what the problem is and is constantly in a state of unease and fear and has no direction in life, that person is suffering from the fact that their subconscious knows there's an ongoing existential threat to their own thriving and survival, and that threat is the lack of knowledge they have. They have no idea how to self-actualize, how to figure out truth from untruth, and when you can't do that, you can't take control of your own life. That is a sense of a loss of control, and there's nothing that makes me more anxious than a sense of a total loss of control. And I started seeing the connection between the two. I started realizing that's a part of what some anxiety is for a lot of people in this world. The brain knows that the person's not only missing enormous amounts of knowledge that it should have by now, that it should know in order to live and thrive, but it knows that it doesn't even know how to gain that knowledge. It wasn't taught how to figure it out. It's completely lost in the fog. So it's overwhelmed with, I don't know how to know, and I guess I can't know. That's creating anxiety. And this is one of the biggest ones for me. It might be my favorite. Boredom. I'm going to steal this from Wikipedia. In conventional usage, boredom is an emotional or psychological state experienced when an individual is left without anything in particular to do, is not interested in his or her surroundings, or feels that a day or period is dull or tedious. It is also understood by scholars as a modern phenomenon which has a cultural dimension. Quote, there is no universally accepted definition of boredom, but whatever it is, researchers argue, it is not simply another name for depression or apathy. It seems to be a specific mental state that people find unpleasant, a lack of stimulation that leaves them craving relief with a host of behavioral, medical, and social consequences. The result of our brain finally believing that without an external stimulant and passive entertainment that we can't enjoy ourselves or be at peace or have fun, the result of that is boredom. On some level, in that moment of boredom, the brain believes that there's nothing interesting to do or to learn, and that there's nothing interesting to make it have fun. How many of you can hear that in the language of somebody, of a teenager or a child who's bored already, that's been through the schooling system? There's nothing interesting to do. I don't know what to do now. That didn't used to be a thing in human history at all. That was not something that was common. That was not rampant. That's actually fairly recent. I think bore/boredom, even as far as it goes back, that it's somewhere around the 1800s. It's fairly recent. And it's a first world thing. People who are out living life, out doing, out studying, out learning, out engaging constantly, they don't have time to be bored. And I'm happy to say that I have gotten rid of boredom from my life. I don't remember the last time I thought I was bored. How many of you have noticed that as you've self-educated, your ability to be bored dropped? That's you getting your core back. That's you wakening up your brain. Your brain is alive. It is getting back the curiosity because the questioner is alive again. And that's what we need to help people get back. The next thing is apathy. This is huge, guys. When you spend 12 years of your life in a prison where your spirit is broken by constantly being told no about everything that you might want, you're handed entertainment and information all from secondhand sources, and instead of taught how to generate that for yourself, you're basically left to whatever's handed to you, and you don't know how to generate it at all. You don't know how to have fulfillment and fun and enjoyment. So eventually you develop the I don't care anymore attitude, because your own free will hurts to have. It hurts to express it. Every time you have a desire or a curiosity, it's smashed. The state fucking destroys it. You're told, no, you can't do that, you can't think that, you can't say that, you can't go to the bathroom without permission. People develop an I don't care anymore attitude because caring about anything is totally futile. It's useless. You have to follow orders. You have to do what you're told. Everything is already figured out. Humans are the smartest we've ever been, chronological snobbery. And you're just a nothing peon in a prison who needs to get ready to join a cubicle farm someday so you can be a measurable unit of production that is leached off by parasites. Joy. So how the fuck do teens and adults not end up suffering from apathy? Right? Apathy is normal at this point. Because our brains have been told there is no reason to do anything. Don't go out and learn. It's useless. There's nothing to learn. There's nothing interesting. Everything you could learn, everything you could decide, everything you could offer society, someone else has already done that. And just listen to them and repeat them. There's no good reason to do anything you want to do. That's what's been communicated by the state over and over and over and over again. We're going to revisit the robot. So, without any way to determine truth or have a sense of certainty for yourself, without a way to verify anything in reality and self-teach, the human cannot direct his own life or program his own mind or emotions how he sees fit. So he remains what? 100% programmed by humans, by external inputs and commands. Having been robbed of his autonomy and suffering from apathy, he believes nothing really matters and nothing is really worth it. He ceases all direction in his life and is stagnant. He becomes only capable of whatever human programmers and designers design him to be capable of. Believing there's nothing new or interesting or worthy to really learn and living for passive entertainment, He requires constant internal input. Constant external input, excuse me. He requires constant external input and is controlled and operated by external influences. Now we have someone who follows orders, who doesn't know right from wrong or how to even determine it. Now we have someone who can be tricked into seeing his own violator as a protector and will do whatever he's told to do. Now we have a good person whose intentions can be twisted and used for evil. The state molded the children of free people into this gradually. It took decades. Someone whose psyche and soul are dulled from being drugged or schooled into depression and apathy and sometimes anxiety. That person what? Final point, does not question and ponder freely, does not explore or learn by any means he or she pleases. Doesn't do it anymore. And I'm not going to end on that note. How do we build our inner human? How do we take our minds and personhood back? I'm going to end on another John Gatto quote. Independent study, community service, adventures and experience, large doses of privacy and solitude, 1,000 different apprenticeships, the one-day variety or longer. These are all powerful, cheap, and effective ways to start a real reform of schooling. But no large-scale reform is ever going to work to repair our damaged children and our damaged society until we force open the idea of school to include family as the main engine of education. If we use school to break children away from parents, and make no mistake, that has been the central function of schools since John Cotton announced it as the purpose of the Bay Colony schools in 1650 and Horace Mann announced it as the purpose of Massachusetts schools in 1850, we're going to continue to have the horror show we have right now, end quote. So adventures and experience, like he said, go outside, guys, get outside. Go out into the world. Find someone good at something, apprenticeships. That doesn't have to be the term that's used. Find a friend, a neighbor, someone you know who's good at something that you want to learn, that you don't know how to do, a skill you would like to develop, and have them teach you how to master it on your own. Have them guide you, but develop it on your own. Learn the nuances of it. Have that experience that no one can take from you because you know how it's done. No expert online can argue against you if you know how that thing works, how that thing functions, and how you have to interact with that thing in reality. And then wake up the questioner. Try to answer questions, starting from the very basics of what you already know about reality, and I mean the basics, pointing to what is the objects you see, the people you see, their behaviors. Build from the words you know and start to work from there. One of the best things I started to do that made me smarter was I started asking, what does that mean? Who, what, when, where, why? When I talked to somebody, I would listen to the words they said, and I would start to wonder what they meant by their words, because I realized we're probably not talking on the same wavelength. I have a different background. Name any word in the English language, people have 1,000 different definitions in their mind probably than even you do for that word. Get on the same page with people. Travel. This breaks the boundaries of media. Media cannot distort reality if you're out in it, experiencing it for yourself. Go to the countries that are supposedly too dangerous. Go to the communities that are supposedly scary. Find out what that's really like for yourself. Because media is distorting reality. It can't paint the truth. Even the most honest journalist, this is important, guys, the most honest journalist who's trying to report on something is still giving you their human lens, their version, their words, their background. So even if they're honest, that's not the same as experiencing it for yourself. It's the same thing as not knowing a situation that you weren't in, right? You hear a story, there's two sides to every story. We've all heard that. If you're hearing someone else's version of a story, you can't trust it, and yet people sit in front of the television and they assume a camera and a few edited clips and some spliced commentary tells them about reality. That is complete horseshit. Am I right? Okay. So I'm going to end on a few more of the things I did. I started going to events with other individuals, like this. I started going to meet other human beings. I stopped holding up in my wall and being passively entertained either through just, reading stuff online, playing video games, watching television, all of that. I started going out and interacting with my fellow man. And that is how I started to get back what makes me alive. I started to learn. My brain had food again, something to function off of. I started realizing that not a lot of things are figured out. We absolutely do not have it all figured out. There are so many things that the religion of the state, even the religion of certain areas of science, just declare to be true. And we've proven over and over again that humans go, oh, we thought that for like 3 decades. Whoops, we were wrong. Anything you think you're not smart enough to know, that's bullshit. Anything you think you're not smart enough to do, that's bullshit. If you think you need it from some expert, that is a lie. Try to figure it out for yourself. Compare data. Take in input, but let the decider be this at the very end. Let the decider be this. And anarchists are already doing this, so don't be discouraged by any of this. The whole point is that we're here because we did this. You are taking your brain back. You are taking your mind back. You've figured out that you are missing something, that you were being sold a lie, that there was shit you needed to figure out, and you went out and started studying, and you started trying to educate yourself, and you started trying to figure out the answers to the questions that you had. Keep your questioning brain alive. Ask questions every day. Challenge every assumption you have about reality. All the people I know and who I've met here, they've all done that. They all show the signs of somebody with a strong core. They can talk to me about almost every topic under the sun. And that is not how a lot of the first world is yet. And we can see that. So remember, when you're looking at people and you see these symptoms, you see the sense of loss, the sense of anxiety and boredom and depression and a stagnation and a loss of any inspiration to do anything. They are missing that because they've been told there's nothing out there worth going to learn. The universe is exciting, and we can figure it out, and we can learn about it for ourselves. So let's fucking do it. Thank you.
In a world where Antifa riots in the city streets, cops rage out of control, and the leader of the free world is a fat-ass casino owner, one event stands alone to make anarchy great again.
I actually love humanity. That is why I'm an anarchist.
Words in the building like we the ceiling, we illin'. No matter who find it appealing, I'm here and I got a feeling that we'll be dealing a lot of pain with a penicillin get drilled in your head. That we are monsters and yeah, we come from the slums, and for months we've been pumped, but for once I am now comfortable. I want to grow, I want some more success, and I want to know that greatness can't be rushed, can't be less, so face the fuss. Feel free to hate on us, we lace them up. Dudes, we done paid them up. Keep snakes away from us and safe from us, you might wanna be. Remember when clowns used to make fun of me and now they wanna be me? See me and they run at me, I'm gonna be the greatest, yeah I wanna be, but I am not the one to be the fakest. For the sake of being played, I'm here like I never left, set to hell. Nah, cause I can't just fail, so just prepare your ears, it'll get for real. Okay, from here, we will never take the sale, it's quiet time. My mind and my thoughts, my highs and my faults, my wins and my loss. When will I fall off? It's a test for me. You are now listening to Veracity. Yeah.
Fuck the media, fuck the banks, fuck drone strikes, fuck tanks, fuck hunger, fuck war, fuck ignoring of the poor, fuck the left, fuck the right, fuck the government. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.